Just another day in paradise here on the Oregon coast. Praise be to God. Okay, Book of John. We're starting chapter 2. A story everybody has heard of. Jesus changes water into wine. That's a story every person on earth has heard of, believers and non-believers alike. Every single person knows this story about Jesus turning water into wine. Now, what does that mean? If you know this story, you know everything you need to know about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And if you reject him, you are rejecting your own salvation. Now, let me start out. Do you know that's what Jesus is trying to do to you? Turn you into wine. New, N-E-W, new wine. He's trying to take your old filthy self and turn it into new wine. A new spirit. New thinking. New beliefs. New faith. That's what this story is about. A few things here. One is that Jesus has power to do anything. If you have the power to just say out loud to someone, I mean, this is the greatest magic trick the world has ever seen. Except it wasn't magic. It was the power of God over all things, all peoples, all elements. Do you ever think wine comes from grapes and elements in the ground and magnesium and phosphate and iron and all these things go into the grape? And then God's in control of all those things. He created all those things. All the iron in the ground he created. So they say, well, how did God turn water into wine? God can manipulate the elements anytime he wants to, anywhere he wants to. Now listen, if you believe Jesus turned water into wine, it doesn't say he touched it. It doesn't say he put his hands on it. It doesn't say there was a healing or anything like that. He just said, fill up the 30-gallon containers with water and then go and draw out the wine. I mean, Jesus did this just by speaking it to be. Another thing is, people wonder about this and they never really get to it because there's not a lot of information. What kind of miracles did Jesus perform around his family, his mother, his earthly dad, his Joseph, Mary, neighbors or kids or his family, his brothers and sisters? What did they see him do miraculous-wise when he was a child? There's not a lot of information about that. But the reason I bring that up is because his mother knew already. She said, son, they're out of wine. So she has seen him do several or even many things as a child, and she knew if he just says the words. Now imagine having a son, S-O-N, who can say, all right, turn the water to wine, and it just happens miraculously. Imagine having an earthly son that can just say that, and it happens. She must have seen something in his childhood that the other miracles that we don't know about. Another thing, this is with God, all things are possible. You think God cannot help me because I owe too much money. God cannot help me. I'm too sick. God cannot help me. I lost a child. God cannot, well, maybe your child is with Jesus. I mean, Think about that. God cannot help me because my marriage is almost over. God cannot help me because I'm in prison. And I got 20 years left in prison. See, what we do as humans is we put limits on God's abilities. We go by what we think, and then we put those same standards to God, to test of God. But his mother never did that. She was more of a watcher. And she held these things in her heart. It says she was more of just watching. She was the kind of person, Mary, that said, I've seen Jesus do certain things, and now she sees him change water into wine. She knows he's the Son of God. There's nothing he can't do. Jesus said to Peter, put down your swords. Do you think if I don't say the word, I can't have a legion of angels down here fighting on my behalf immediately? He said, no, but these things must happen. The sacrifice of sins on the cross. Let's get into it. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Now, if I could be wrong, but most of those weddings lasted 1 week. It's not like the American wedding today. We spend $50,000 on a wedding for one afternoon. Talk about a big fat waste of money. I mean, you could buy 3 or 4 cars for that. You could get the large down payment on a $200,000 house. But Americans, we kind of judge these things the way we do them. We spend $50,000 on a wedding for 1 day. And then the bride and groom take off and you never see them again. But back then, the weddings would last a week. And the engagements weren't that long either. It wasn't a long engagement. So if you got invited to a wedding, you see, the wedding banquet, when we get married to Jesus in heaven, it's going to be 7 days long. And I'm wondering, I don't have the answer. I'd have to find out. Are we going to be married to Jesus during the 7-year tribulation? I don't have the answer. 7 years on earth, 7 days in heaven, I don't have the answer, because what about those who get saved? What about those who get saved during the tribulation? Then the wedding banquet would be over. I don't know. I don't have the answer. But I guess I could look it up on Google or some pastor's website or something. We are going to get married to Jesus, and it's going to be a 7-day wedding banquet with God, all the angels, the saints, the believers, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Everyone's going to be there. And we're going to be married to him for all eternity. It's going to be so amazing. On the third day, that's what it means. On the third day of the wedding, they have 4 days left to go. Now, if you were in charge of the wedding and you ran out of wine or food on the third day, it would be kind of embarrassing, right? It would be very, very embarrassing if your guests were not being taken care of. That would be a great insult back then. On the third day, and I'm just going by a 7-day wedding, banquet. Now, if you invited 200 or 300 people to this wedding, I mean, you had to find places for them to sleep, everything. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother, his earthly mother, was there And Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." She didn't tell him what to do, but she knew. She had a personal relationship with him every single day. I mean, she used to change his diapers. Jesus was fully God and Jesus was fully man. His mother knew how to ask. She just simply went up to her son and said, "They have no more wine." Well, like I said, it was only the third day. That would be very embarrassing. Very, very embarrassing indeed. Now, the way Jesus answers is very interesting. He doesn't call her mother or mom or anything. He says, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come." You know, that's a very interesting answer. I suppose you could come up with several different answers. Why did he call her woman instead of mom or mother? Because God has no mother, actually. You know, the Catholics believe that Mother Mary is in heaven and she's the mother of God. No, God has no mother. Mary is in heaven as a believer with the rest of us. And that is good enough. That is more than good enough. When they say you should pray to Mary, you should not pray to Mary. She doesn't have power any more than you or I do. You don't pray to the disciples. They say the Catholic Church says say the rosary or pray to certain saints. They got prayers to the saints that your car will run better. No. Why would you do that when you can pray to Jesus that your car will run better? Just go directly to the source, Jesus himself. Now, Jesus wasn't disrespecting his mother. He said, "Woman." That's the first indication we get that she is that, just a woman who has to believe in God, Jesus, just like we do. He wasn't disrespecting his mother. Matter of fact, that's what I'm saying. I don't think he actually had an earthly mother, so to speak, in the spiritual sense. It says Jesus' mother was there. "Why do you involve me, woman? My hour is not yet come." You know, part of the Bible, they were trying to force Jesus to keep pushing forward into his ministry. Now, maybe there's something in your life you're trying to force God to hurry up and give you. I'm like that. I'm kind of an impatient person myself. I mean, I freely admit it. I'm not the greatest with patience. I mean, I want to open my Christmas gifts when I was a little kid on, December 1st. I didn't want to wait till December 25th. Or in our case, we did it on Christmas Eve. I'm just an impatient person. I used to have arguments with my mother. "Well, you've already bought the gift, right?" She says, "Yeah." "Well, then why can't you just give it to me a week early?" She'd say, "You need more patience, David. We're going to all sit down together and have a nice Christmas together." I said, "Well, I used to come up with all kinds of things." "Well, why don't you let me play with it and then we can rewrap it?" I told her. I was like, 12 years old. "We can rewrap it and put it under the tree and I'll open it again and act surprised." My mother says, David, that's not how it works. And then my mother said, and if you don't stop bothering me about it, I'm going to take the gift back to the store and you won't get it at all. And that was enough for me to keep my mouth shut. That's what she's saying. See, there was part of God's timing. Jesus had to be revealed at a perfect timing. He had to do, you think all these events were just random in the life of Christ. No. God has specific things that needed to be done on specific days and seasons concerning the life of Christ. Christ was born on a specific God's timeline. Christ was crucified specifically on the exact day and hour God chose. Now let me say this. The rapture is going to happen exactly on the specific day, hour, and moment that God has already chosen. It's already chosen by God. I personally do not believe man can do anything to change the date of the rapture. Or like the date of the Noah's flood, or the date that Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. I don't believe it. Now, I believe if Sodom and Gomorrah would have repented, they wouldn't have been destroyed. But God knew they weren't going to repent. See, God knows all these things before one angel was even made. To say God is all-knowing means he knows all things at all times, all past, all present, and all future. Well, people ask, how could the names be written in the book of life before the creation of the world, before there was even any men? How do you know who's going to be saved or not? That's why people believe in predestiny, and that's why that's false, because God wrote those names in the book of life before the creation of the world to prove his sovereignty and his all-knowing. That's all that is. God said, I know who is going to be saved before I even created them. Now, you could say, well, why would God do that? No, that's not the question. The question is, why do you reject God? That's the question. You say, well, God's making me reject him. No, he's not. We all have the exact same opportunity to be saved. And you say, yeah, but my name's not written in the book of life. That's because God knows you're going to reject him your whole life. Well, then why did he create me? I know this is hard to understand. He created you to give you a chance to receive him. He never took away your opportunity to receive him. He just knows those who will say yes and those who will say no. Let's say you have 3 children, right? 3 sons. And you say, hey, sons, I got 3 shovels here. And I'm going to dig a trench 100 foot long and lay some sewer pipe and redirect, our septic tank, for example. A real smelly job. And your sons are 20, 18, and 16 years old. And the father holds up 3 shovels and says, whoever wants to help me, here's a shovel. The father takes his shovel and walks off. And only 1 or 2 of those sons showed up. Now pay attention. I'm explaining predestiny to you. Not predestiny, I'm explaining how God knows in advance. How your name is written in the book of life. So at the end of the day, The father walks in the house and shows a piece of paper that he wrote the day before yesterday. They go, "What's this?" They say, "That's the names of who I thought was going to come help me dig the new trench for the septic tank." And let's say 2 of his 3 sons went with him and the third one took off down to town. And you look at the piece of paper and it's got the 2 sons' names that helped him right on the paper. An earthly father knows well in advance which 2 of the 3 sons are going to reject the job offer and take off. So how much more would God, a sovereign, perfect, holy God, know in advance who is going to be saved, accept him, and who is going to reject him? So we come here, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come." You see, we are trying to make Jesus go faster. Is there something God promised to give you and you haven't received it yet in like 5 years? Jesus is saying, don't push me. My hour isn't come yet. If everybody finds out who turned this water to wine, they're going to come and try to force me to do all kinds of things. And we say, well, why not? I mean, we might as well just use everything God has and completely wear him out and use him up and then discard him. That's what we do as humans. But God, this is the perfect example. God has a specific timeline. I was born in 1962. 62 years ago. And if I was born at any other time, earlier or later, my life would not have gone as good as it has. God has specific, detailed plans at specific, detailed timelines. His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now she just ignores him and says to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for the ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. So let's say 6 times 25 is 150. Man, I'm quick. There's 150 gallons there, approximately. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." He never touched the water. He never did anything. He was trying to remain secret. That's the whole point. He was trying to keep who he was secret for now. He was not looking to reveal himself yet because it was not time. So is there something you're asking Jesus to turn into wine in your life? Can you get rid of my finances? Can you get me a better job? I told you that story before in these Bible studies. In Colorado, I moved there. I went down and applied for a job, and the guy looked at me and says, "Oh, no, I don't hire people like you." True story. I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, this is a job at a sandwich shop. You're wearing a tie to the interview. I don't hire people, white-collar people. I hire only hard-working people." And so he didn't like the fact that I had a tie on during an interview. Now, I was raised, you always wear a tie and a suit jacket to an interview. I don't care if it's digging ditches, but times have changed. And I said, okay. And I went home, and a week later, the Lord said, go back down and apply at that job. And I said, like a dummy, I already tried that. He said, no, he doesn't like me, Lord. Now, I said it, I was naive. I said it with a pure heart. The Lord said, trust me, go down there. He'll like you now. I went down there. I walked in with the same tie on, the exact same tie. The guy sat down and said, boy, I really like the fact that you wore a tie to an interview. He said, that's impressive. He said, can you start work tomorrow? The Lord said, don't tell him you were there before. Just keep your mouth closed. I said, yes, I'll see you tomorrow. And there's a whole nother story to that I told in another Bible study, but how the owner got saved and all these things. So God's perfect timing. What are you asking for? Jesus' mother was trying to force him forward, see, to do something, and it wasn't time for him to be revealed. That's how I read this. Just because God's not giving you something, it doesn't mean he can't do it. It doesn't mean he lost his ability to do it. No, God is always God. God is always God. That can never change. Timing. The timing has to be perfect. Like when I met my wife for the first time. The timing had to be perfect. Because of my own stupidity, I would have screwed it up. You have to allow God, you have to believe that he can do what you're asking, and that he wants to do what you're asking. It's his will. And if you can get past those first two things, then you have to allow God to do it his way, and allow him to do it his way at a certain time. I mean, how many teenagers think about driving for 4 or 5 years before they even get a drive? If we let them drive at 12 years old, it'd be a disaster. If we let them drive at 17 years old, it's going to probably be okay if they have the right amount of training and everything. But if we give them a brand new sports car at 14 years old, they're going to crash it. It has to be the perfect timing. You know, they used to have the wedding banquets back then. They had a master of the banquet, someone they would, a close family friend or someone they would hire, or someone of importance who was in charge of everything. The servants did what Jesus asked. They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." So the bridegroom is probably going, I have no idea what the master of the banquet's talking about. The bridegroom, probably some young guy, just threw all the beer out there on the table. Take whatever you want, you know. What Jesus did there in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now, his mother saw it, the disciples saw it, the servants who put the water in the jug saw it. That's how they knew it wasn't a magic trick. They said, we were standing there, we put it in there, and Jesus didn't even move out of his seat. And the water instantly turned to the best wine you've ever had in your life. And now look what Jesus also did. He gave the credit to the bridegroom. Did you see Jesus jump up and go, attention everybody, I just turned wine or water into wine, and I want everybody to give me credit. No, he didn't look for that. He looked to remain secret. He allowed the bridegroom to get all the credit. People went to the bridegroom and says, hey, you're an intelligent fella there for, 19, 20 years old. You, the bridegroom, are smart enough to hold the best until the last. That's amazing. And you can see that young bridegroom going, uh-huh. I've been drinking. I have no idea what you're talking about. You see, back when they used to wait to have sex until they were married, your family was involved, her family was involved. They had a 1 week long banquet. There was food, there were servants, there was master of the banquet, there was animals coming back and forth, there were hundreds of gifts lined up for the young couple that just got married. I'll tell you a funny story. When I got married, I had this friend who was so poor, but I wanted him as one of my groomsmen. I had to rent the suit for him. He had no money and no job, and his parents were poor. But, he's one of my best friends, so he just passed away at age 58 when he was about 3 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, he just passed away at age 58. So anyways, he was so poor, I had to rent him the shoes. I had to put him in the car, let him stay in the motel the night before because he didn't have any money. I had to give him some money to walk around. Oh, I'll tell you, it was the greatest ever. He was a great guy. Just, we were all young and dumb, And so he gave me this handwritten note. Everybody had to put a gift on the table. So I looked, and his name was, I thought, wow, this guy got me a gift? And I opened it up, and in the envelope was a note, a handwritten napkin from the bar. A handwritten on a bar napkin that said, congratulations on your wedding. I owe you $20 as a gift. He gave me an IOU for a wedding gift. I would just laugh, and so that was the one I liked the best out of all of them, of course. I called him about 20 years later on the phone, and he had no idea who I was. And I kept prodding him, teasing him. I'd given him clues. He didn't even recognize my voice because we hadn't spoken like 10 years. And I said, all right, I'll tell you, you went to my wedding and you put on a napkin, you owe me $20. He says, Dave, How you doing, man? I said, well, I called to get the $20. I'm really broke and down and out. I need $20. And 20 years later, my friend said, I don't have $20 either. Now, I had $20. I would just mess with him, see what he would say. But he still never had $20 extra after working 20 years. And he was living with his mother. It's a true story. I'm not making this up. That's what I'm saying here. You got all these people involved in this wedding, and all of a sudden this miraculous wine, the best wine they've ever tasted. Nobody's ever tasted wine this good because it came from the hand of Jesus, even though his hands never touched it. You say, this is another, I can tell you another thing about God here. How did God create all those galaxies and stuff? Well, it tells in John, the first chapter of John, through the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, the Word, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made. How did all the galaxies? Did God take his hands and shape all those and throw them out there? No. He spoke it, and it happened. And this is something the average Christian cannot wrap their mind around. God spoke the Rocky Mountains into place. God spoke the entire continent of China into place. And when you finally realize that and you wrap your mind around the fact that God just says something, and that thing that he said happens immediately, then you start to wrap your mind around, wait a minute, that's the God I serve. Oh, this is the God I serve. So anything God says instantly happens. Okay. Wow. Now, to make it even more realistic, God does not sit there and say, okay, now I want to make Mars, now Pluto, now Venus, now Mercury, now Saturn. Now I want to make some suns. Okay, now over there we're going to make some stars. No. This is the most awe-inspiring thing about God. God says, make the galaxies, and poof! 1 trillion miles of galaxies in space are created spontaneously. Now, I'm telling you these true things because now look, his mother came and said, son, can you turn water into wine? She wasn't saying, can you? ? She's saying, will you help them out so they're not embarrassed? And Jesus took compassion and said, all right, put some water in those jars there. And out came the best wine. God made wine. God made the wine. So what are you asking God to do? And do you really know who God is? And maybe God's been taking 6 months, 5 months, 3 months, 3 years, 5 years to give you this thing he promised you. I mean, look at Abraham. He promised him a son, and it took a while. He promised him all the descendants, numerous as the stars in the sky, and that's, been 4,000 years or something. He promised Noah the greatest flood the earth ever saw, and that took, some people say 70 years to 100 years to build the ark. God promised Noah a flood that would cover the whole earth, and 75 years later it happened. 75 years later. So you're sitting there wondering, well, God told me something, last year that he was going to do, and I haven't seen anything yet. Do not mistake in your impatience. Like I said, I'm one of those impatient people. I'm not anymore, but I used to be when I was younger. Do not let your impatience get in between God's ability. No, God is able to do what he says. In fact, you're looking at it as the thing you want is the biggest thing to you, so you're kind of panicking because this is my whole life, man. This is what I am asking. And God is saying, calm down. Just believe and you will receive at my perfect timing. I will take care of you. Anything that you're asking God for to do with you on earth, you're really panicking because you're not putting into perspective you're going to live for all eternity. So if you're going to live for 10 trillion years forward, right? Even though it's not really how it works, but you're going to live for 10 trillion years. You're sitting here on earth wondering why God's taking 3 earthly years to give you what he promised. I met a woman once. This is a true story. She was stranded in the Rocky Mountains in a snowstorm. And I had to hook up my truck and pull her out. And she was crying and weeping. I said, hey, it's not that big of a deal. She says, I'm not crying about that. I'm not making this up. We were the only 2 people up on this mountain. And I had to pull her out to safety. And I was just out there in the woods having fun, actually. But she said, I'm crying because I'm a Christian. And she didn't want to tell me. So I'm a Christian, so tell me. Maybe I could pray for you. She said, I've been trying to have a child, me and my husband, for 5 years. We've been married. And we've been trying to have a child for 3 years, and we've had 3 miscarriages. She said, I came up here to think, and it started snowing, and I got stuck. I said, oh, okay, that's why I was up in those mountains. So I said, well, do you mind if I pray for you? So we prayed that God would give her the child he promised her. And I saw that woman at the mall in that city about 1.5 years later with a baby. And I went up and said, do you remember me? And she said, you're the person that prayed for me. I told my husband about you, and you pulled me out of the disaster there. I said, so God gave you what he promised. And you know what her response was? She said, yes, I was very impatient and freaking out. I should have trusted God more because she said it's all about God's perfect timing. That's right. That's why Jesus said, woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come. Now you understand why he said that. It's not time for me to be revealed yet. Now let's finish up. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of his signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. They stayed there for a few days. Or there they stayed for a few days. That's the end of this story in chapter 2. We'll finish there. And then we'll go on to the next one next time. But I'm telling you, what is God's timing? it said, and he glorified. See, he was glorified through that miracle, see? Now, I want to leave you with this thought. You're going to live as a believer, you're going to live with Jesus for all eternity. Okay? I had to turn on a car here. It's getting a little cold out. You're going to live with Jesus for all eternity, never stopping. So now that you know this, does it help you to calm down a little bit in your life? Does it make you calmer in what you're doing? Not panicking. Some people panic on Monday about Friday. Just 4 days away, they're panicking about something. But that's not how God thinks. That's not how God operates. That's not how God works his miracles. If it is God's will, the thing that you know God promised you. That's very important. If you think God promised it to you, but he never did, you just got screwed up in your thinking, then you're never going to receive it. You're not going to receive something just because you believe you want it or just you believe God wants to give it to you. No, you have to actually know, is this God's will for me to have this next thing he's promised me? I will leave you with this thought. One time I was asking for something because the Lord said, oh, did you hear those geese? Geese flying out there. The Lord promised me something. I won't get into that. I'll just keep it personal, but a secret. The Lord promised me something, but I had not received it, in some time yet. And here's what the Lord told me. He said, enjoy the green pasture I have you standing in now. I was like, wow, that's profound. He said, you're waiting for me to give you the next thing. See, this is how I learned to be more patient. This was many years ago. The Lord said, you're waiting for something that I promised you in the future. I said, yes, Lord, that's right. I'm an impatient person, I admit it. The Lord said, I have you standing in a green pasture right now today. And later on, I will take you to a different green pasture to do something else over there. But right now, today, you're not really enjoying the pasture, P-A-S-T-U-R-E, green pasture I have you standing in right now. Enjoy that and learn the lessons there now. And then I will take you to the next place, the next stage in your life that the Lord had planned for me. And by the way, I believe the Lord had plans for me before the creation of the world. That's what the Bible teaches. I believe the Lord had your whole life planned out for you before the creation of the world. And all the good things he wants you to personally have. And as a believer, you can really only do one of two things. Calmly accept what God gives you when he gives it to you and say thankful, with thankfulness. Or you can panic and get lack of patience and screw up what the Lord's trying to give you. And like my mother said, if you don't stop asking me, I'm going to take your toy back to the store and you won't get it at all. That shut me up right away. So the Lord taught me, and it's funny, on this video, there's a green pasture, see? Enjoy the green pasture you're standing in now, today. When people are lying in the hospital on their deathbed. I hope that never happens to anyone, but they always have one thing in common. They wish they could go back in time and enjoy everything more than they did. I've never met anyone or heard of one single person say, I wish I would have made more money. Almost everyone says, boy, I wish I could go back and enjoy my 20s more, my 30s more, my 40s more, my 50s more. I wish I could enjoy more of what God gave me instead of worrying about, what I don't have. So what did we learn in this parable, this story? God's timing is going to override everything else in all history. Do you ever think about common sense? Like, there's these guys, 3 months before the great flood happens, Noah's finishing the ark and he's putting the pitch on it. And there's this group of guys down there saying, so here's what we ought to do. I say next year, and then 3 years from then, we'll go over to this other area and start doing the planting over there, making the money. And then on the 4th or 5th year, we're going to do this, this, or that. And 3 months later, the entire earth flooded. And that's what I say. God's plans, God's timing overrides everything else. You can have all the plans in the world, but if God says it's time to flood the earth, your plans don't mean squat. And that's what I'm telling you. The only logical thing you can do, the only logical conclusion is to take what God gives you, say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Lord, and then enjoy what God is giving you until he shows up and tells you to go a different direction. And you should be praying every day and glorifying the name of God, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit. But you're not in charge. You're not the one in control. You think you're in control. I'm always amazed. I know a lot of Christians, they want everyone to like them. And I laugh. They say, what are you laughing at? I say, you want everyone to like you. Well, yeah. That's not even possible. It's not even possible to get along with everyone and have every single person like you. But what they're really saying is, and because I've had conversations with these people, they say, well, I really want everyone to respect me. I say, oh man, now you have an even bigger problem. Look at Joe Biden. He's the president of the United States. 50% of the country respects him and 50% doesn't like him at all. Look at Donald Trump. He was the president of the United States. 50% of the country liked him and 50% of the country hated his guts. It's not possible that everyone would like you, and it's not possible everyone will respect you. The only guarantee you have is if Jesus Christ has his hand on the timing of your life after you become saved as a believer. And when you come to that conclusion, when you know God does have his hand on the timing of my life, it brings a peace over you and a calmness over you. And patience or impatience is no longer even part of the equation. You're just living to glorify God. You're praying every day. You read your Bible every day. You teach your family every day about Jesus. You tell someone about Jesus every day. And you're not worried about anything. Not worried about anything. That's what Jesus told his mother. Woman, my time has not come yet. Why are you trying to involve me? It's not my time yet. So that's what we learned. Two things. Number one, God is in control of the timing, when you'll receive it, and what you'll receive, and how you'll receive it. And the measure you will receive of it. And number two, patience. Enjoy the pasture you're standing in now. Don't worry about the green pasture God's going to give you 3 years from now. Enjoy the pasture he has you standing in right now and learn the lessons right now there.